things that are everyday life events that we are experiencing or Singaporeans are experiencing. And the question is, can we solve them with data and provide them answers on what they do?
Interesting.
And Swee Hoon is such a great writer that when she writes these stories, my mother can understand it. That makes it, wow, this is something worth reading.
Welcome back to Chills with TFC. I'm your host Reggie, aka Your Chief Financial Coconut, and today I have a whole suite of guests, all very, very smart people. What love? Paiseh, yeah. But yeah, we're here to talk a little bit about behavioral economics and some learnings over time, of how the Singapore public does different things, right? And before we begin, would you like to introduce yourself? Don't Paiseh.
I'm Swee Hoon, Ang Swee Hoon from the Department of Marketing at NUS Business School.
I'm Sumit Agarwal. I'm in the finance department at NUS Business School.
Okay.
I'm Sing Tian Fu. I'm also at the Department of Real Estate, also from NUS Business School.
Great. So, okay, everybody's from NUS Business School, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Very good.
Yeah, very good school.
Yes.
You say marketing, people cannot stop. She had to do it. Okay. This is your third book, right? And you've done many different, research to come together even on these different books, right? So maybe just kind of roll. Yeah. How did we start on this?
Yeah, so such research which we have done are always published in academic journals. And we were telling ourselves, right, if they appear in academic journals, who reads them? It's PhD
correct. That's a marketing. Correct.
Professors.
Yeah.
It's a very smart group, but limited. And we said, isn't that such a shame? Because these research comes up with findings that we think is useful to everybody, not just to the academic field. And so we wanted to make it accessible. I think that's the term.
Yeah.
To everyone, even the layman on the street, right? Because it would benefit him so that he makes smarter decisions. And we started off with op-eds. And then Sumit says, hey, why don't we write a book? And I think we all got home.
Just go.
And of course, writing these books in layman's language is not easy because we're so used to writing in the academic style, okay? So we had to take out all the letters, and all that stuff and put them really simply, and we wrote it in a story form so that it's more interesting. So that's how it started with Kiasunomics. At that time, it was just called Kiasunomics, not even one, because we never knew there will be a 2 and a 3, thinking that was it. And the response was very encouraging, right? So that came the 2, and then now a 3.
Nice.
Just to add on, I think I have to first give credit to Swee Hoon. She essentially wrote all the 3 books. And it is her brainchild of having this family and the evolution of this family and the interactions with various entities within Singapore, and bringing in the Singlish and actually making it a story. Whereas if you think of research as fairly dry, nobody really understands it. I mean, and my view was always, can my daughter, who is 14 years old, can she read these stories and be excited and know the father does something good? Or her daughter, who was younger at that time, can she say, oh, these guys actually do something that matters for his 2 children? And I think now all our children can relate to these books and say, our parents actually do something that we understand.
Yeah, actually, my children is in the book now. That was quite. So it's stupid, right? That'll be interesting. I think, as Simon mentioned, when we first started, is Kiasunomics. We don't even know there's 2 and 3. I think with the fact that there's third series now coming out, it's also reflect the growth in terms of research. Because I think all these are Singapore-based, Singapore-centric research. We actually started this about more than 10 years ago. When Sumi first came, then we start looking at, why don't we do some study Singapore-centric kind of research? Because there's so many interesting policy and data, we can do a lot of these experiments. Yeah. Because in the past, it's really hard to get this paper published in the top journal. But I think increasingly, we actually prove there's some progress that have been made. Some of them have published in really good journal. and a lot of attention as well. Some topic which, as we talked about earlier, this experiment cannot be done in other country where we have the unique institutional setup and demographic characteristic that allow us to do a lot of these experiments.
I mean, just to add a little bit to this, I think our view has been that, look, we are using Singaporean taxpayer money to do research at NUS. So whatever we do at some level has to benefit Singaporeans. The average Singaporean should be able to relate to this research that we do. And a lot of the research academics typically do are based on the US markets or US settings. And so we wanted to make it very local, but still make it high quality, that it can publish in the world's top journals, but give the Singaporean experience or Singaporean flavor to these stories.
Yeah, fair. And for all of you that don't know, publishing in big journals is important in academics' career, right? So sometimes there's a tussle between you want to publish local and then but you still want to progress, right? So it's good that this thing has kind of become a frontier in changing how some of these research are published.
Yeah, and I must say also, Singapore, the government has experimented with all these various implementation of certain policies that makes it unique. And based on our research and the findings, then Singapore becomes the standard, right? That people look up to, oh, does this work? Oh, yeah, this policy that they've implemented, it works. So we could do the same as well. So Singapore as a nation becomes the leader, right? For others to follow.
Fair. And it's very interesting that your world building involves all of their families, right? So it actually makes it easier, right? Yeah. And if you have not checked it out, you can go and explore their books, Kiasunomics, and today we're talking about the third book, right? But before we get into the books, right? In fact, I would like to move away from the books because I think people can just read the books on their own, right? But with you all in town, right? I want to talk a little bit more about the interesting research that forms the backbone of the book, right? So maybe we can start with some of the interesting ones in the first book. How did they make it into it, and what caught your eyes at some of these?
So I think the best research is that comes from casual observation of problems that you experience, and then you start saying, can the data support this? And one of the earliest problems I observed when I came to Singapore is I used to go for my yoga class, and I would all the time after yoga be looking for a taxi to go home. And I would be like trying to flag down a taxi. I know it's green, it should stop for me, but the person doesn't want to stop. It bothered me for a month that why don't they want to stop? And so I said, let's see if the data exists. So we found the data, and then we started looking at the data and saying, okay, why are these taxis not stopping? We realized very quickly in the data that once they made a certain amount of money, which in Singapore case was around $100, then they just did not want to take up a new job. Either they are sitting at a coffee shop, sitting with their friends, drinking coffee, or they just want to say, I only want a certain ride, which is going in a very specific direction that I want to take them in. Otherwise, I will not entertain you. And that's what I realized. Okay, so there is an economic or a behavioral aspect on why they were not picking me up. Another aspect that I was observing every time when I used to stand in my balcony from my apartment is I used to see this long line of cars into this school that was next to my apartment. So why are there such long line? Why is this school having a long line and other schools are not? Then I was talking to my colleagues, Tien Fu, and found out that there are certain schools that are very, very good. And they drive a premium in house prices in Singapore. So we started digging and said, let's do research on this and see what is the premium that a school can drive for housing prices in Singapore. And we looked at the data and we found out that number was around 8 to 9%. A good school can drive up house prices by 8%.
Wow. Are we talking about Nanyang Primary? Right, that's the...
I mean, they're experimenting using the Raffles Girls School as experiments.
So does that hold...
Maybe.
That maybe even higher. Is it? Does it hold true in the other... I mean, based on your research, it holds true in all the other major schools in that sense?
No, actually, we do experiments in the sense that we look at when the good school move, how this affect the prices in
so
the
Tengah
location.
house prices gonna move already.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna shift there, right?
So we want to look at the behavior because I think it'll be interesting to see why this house price is so closely correlated with location of good school. It's not just a good school, but it also must be within 2 kilometers, within 1 kilometer. Because it's not just a close proximity to school. It doesn't give them the priority if you're outside 2 kilometers.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very unique kind of experiment. We do find this discontinuity. After 2 kilometers, we don't see the kind of effect. And then if you are within 1 kilometer, effect is stronger. So I think this is a very niche, very nice experiments in a sense, which is unique to Singapore because you define that 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer
It's true.
boundary.
Because of the balloting,
Yeah, that's
you know, for the schools, right? That's why you see property prices like that. That's why you see Bishan move, you know, because all these, you know, so-called big good schools are there,
Because it's very
right?
interesting if you look at two houses, one is just slightly beside, outside the boundary, the prices is
Sways,
quite
yeah, the
different.
person.
So that's why the price premium actually is the differences in price. I'm talking about the difference between the two.
Interesting.
How this will be
Interesting.
impacted.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so it's not just schools, but also MRT stations.
Yeah.
We also did the same. Or even where the train line, the track is, you know, that one is a
Noise effect.
noise effect, right? Yeah.
So flats near the train lines generally will kind of have a lower price.
Lower price.
Okay.
Especially those facing the MRT track.
Okay.
Not close to the MRT station, but yet very close to the track. You don't enjoy the proximity, the connectivity, but you have this amenity effect.
Interesting.
That's why I think this is what we have seen.
Interesting. But just to be clear on this, I don't know if you've kind of followed up with this research because now schools, now MRT stops are everywhere, right? Does this premium still hold?
Yeah. Actually, the school studies, they'll be interesting that we hope we'll be able to get more data to look at because I think recently they're not just look at the centric of the school location, they look at the boundary. I mean, the distance may shift a little bit. Those who used to be outside the 2 kilometer boundary because of the chain of the definition, it may be included now. So probably we can follow up on that. And the other thing we need to get more data is actually who actually pay for this premium. If you don't have a school going children, so why do you want to live near the school?
Yeah.
I think this is something that we have been talking about, but not easy to find the data. So hopefully we'll be able to gather more information and data, and not just the prices. We want to know who are the buyers as well, so that we can find out more.
Oh, that's
on all these
interesting.
things.
That's interesting. So there can be a good chance that if the circumference changes, you know, to be like 4 kilometer, then the 4 kilometer zone will all have experienced something, you know, that has such a premium paid just because the school is there.
That's why I think in Singapore case, this policy experiment is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because they're not just changing boundary, they also change the percentage of the prioritization in terms of distance because they no longer give such a high weightage to affiliation because they just make some changes recently.
Yeah.
So even though you have affiliation, maybe the priority may be slightly lower.
Okay.
So they want to have more inclusive kind of arrangement so that more people can actually apply even though you are not living within the 2 kilometer boundary.
Yeah.
So I think how these changes in the policy, educational policy, can affect housing prices.
Interesting.
So
interesting.
this is something that we try to explain and try to understand the
Yeah,
behavior.
but the other side of the story can also hold, right? If let's say you reduce the alumni element,
that's right.
you expand this circle, and then you let the prices move up, then it's a self-select to this school, right? More rich people can buy in that way, kind of buy their way into the school, right?
I think that's a unique kind of
And that's for
characteristic.
Kiasunomics 5.
That's why the Kiasunomics come in because it's really you need to be very competitive. Family to be competitive to actually really
Very stress. Stress. Okay, interesting. Oh my God, school's so interesting.
Some of the other ideas, just to kind of point out, started out that, I mean, things that are very unique to Singapore. Singapore being so small, you can see the border to Malaysia is so packed. The question is, why are people going to Malaysia all the time? And are they doing cross-border shopping? Because prices are much cheaper. Now, if you can actually look at the data and show that people go across to JB and do that, and there are real implications of that on tax collection in Singapore. Obviously, there is border checks. They want to make sure you're not putting in a lot of petrol and essentially bringing petrol in from cheaper petrol. But these are the kind of questions that excited us looking at the data, or like the Great Singapore Sale. I mean, it goes on every year.
Is it still relevant? Great Singapore sale, right?
But the question is, do people buy, and do they just substitute consumption during the Singapore sale time and reduce consumption before or after the sale time? So there is really no benefit of the Great Singapore Sale because I substitute my consumption away from the Singapore sale and do more. And merchants think they're making money. In reality, they are not, because their sales are down before and after the Great Singapore Sale.
Interesting. Okay, so that is the position at this
Yes.
point.
So these are the kind of questions that excite us, looking at things that are everyday life events that we are experiencing or Singaporeans are experiencing. And the question is, can we solve them with data and provide them answers on what they do?
Interesting.
And Sui Hun is such a great writer that when she writes these stories, my mother can understand it. That makes it, wow, this is something worth reading.
Your mother read the book.
Great. So
I think it's very interesting to look at this behavior and all the Singapore sales and all this.
yeah,
I think the other interesting
did your research kill the Great Singapore Sale? Because you put it out there, then the merchants like, bo hua, let's just stop this thing.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just the behavior of trying to optimize, but we may end up because of the trade-off cannibalization.
Exactly.
We're also actually looking at the other interesting stories like Hungry Ghost months. Whether you buy house or sell house, or can you buy cheaper houses during Hungry Ghost months? Interestingly, who buy house during Hungry Ghost month and who are more superstitious?
Yeah.
In fact, if you are not superstitious, why are you not buying house during the Hungry Ghost month if you can get better bargain during the time?
So is there actually better bargain during the
We do
Hungry
find
Ghost
there's
month?
some lower prices during Hungry Ghost month, but I think there are many story behind why this, because older people are not buying, but the younger people continue buying, non-Chinese are buying. If you really not superstitious, probably you can get good bargain during the time.
So this effect may fade out as the generation kind of move on. People are not as superstitious, maybe.
Yeah, I think there are still older people tend to be a little bit more, especially Chinese, the elderly tend to be more superstitious. When can you move in? When can you buy a
the
house?
Hong Sui master, right?
Sui
Yeah,
master.
yeah.
Because in the earlier study, when we look at the numerology of 8 and 4, whether 8 is superstitious or 4 is unlucky, we do also find that Chinese people willing to pay more for a lucky number. But we also find that non-Chinese also paying more for the lucky number 8. So these are some of the main interesting behavior. Because not just superstitious behavior, we also correlate with, especially for Chinese, when they actually have company, when do they register the company? They also look at the calendar. They call yellow calendar in Chinese. They were trying to find a superstitious date. So there's some correlation in terms of superstitious belief.
Interesting.
Why you pay number 8? Houses with 8 higher price? Not because they are real outcome, just because of superstitious behavior.
Interesting. So that means there is no conclusive evidence to show that if you buy the 8 number house, you will definitely make more money. It's just someone at some point in their buyer journey decide to pay a premium for this thing. That's about it.
Yeah, actually, we also look at some outcome variable in the sense whether do people live in number 8, houses with number 8 in the address, they are more lucky or unlucky in terms of car accidents. There's no difference in terms of car accident. If you're more in car accidents, the car accident rate is basically it's random. It doesn't matter whether you live in number 8 or number 4.
It probably matters more the road size in your vicinity or something.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but beyond the research, although a lot of the research is on properties, beyond that, we also did other non-property research like golfing,
Yes.
right? And the dragon babies. Yeah.
Let's talk about the golfing, which is interesting. Let me just come back to this point. I want to make a broader point, which is, look, we do research because of the data availability at times. Ideally, the questions are broader. For example, the question I was talking about cross-border shopping. I mean, I think it has intrigued me all the time that when I think about, SQ flight attendants or somebody, they fly to various countries. I bet they are bringing in loads of stuff in their suitcases to sell here or give it to their friends. Okay, but I can't test that in the data. So what I can test is the consumers who are living close to the border to JB, do they go and spend more money in JB? To make the broader point that, look, there is some tax evasion essentially because Singapore's sales taxes revenue is going down because people people are doing this.
Mm,
Okay. So broadly also, the one big question that we thought about very early on is what is happening to gender imbalance around the world? I mean, if you think about it, there are many more CEOs, around 90% of CEOs or board of directors in companies are men. So why are women not being able to climb to that thing? So how do you test this? Very difficult. Okay, what is the reasons or mechanisms that men climb this? I mean, when I was in the private sector, one of the ways I was able to impress my boss was I used to play golf with him. And when you have 5 hours of hitting a ball which goes in random directions, you have a lot of time to talk to the boss and tell him, I am so good. I do so many things, and the boss remembers you and kind of gives you a promotion later on. And since it's a male dominated sport, you see a lot of men actually getting promoted, maybe. So we thought, let's look at the data and see in Singapore, which is a unique country because all golf outings, you have to register your name. So you can't just randomly go play golf in Singapore without putting down your name and who you are and what your golf score is. No other country you do that.
Really?
So if you get the golf data, you can then go out and test who played golf with whom, and are they actually CEOs or board of directors of a company, and how many of them are females.
Yeah.
So you can correlate that more females, when they play golf, they're more likely to be in the board of directors, which means they have now 5 hours to talk to some boss saying that I should be on the board.
Ah, interesting.
For the record, I don't play golf.
In other
But
words,
we should start playing golf. So
then you can move even further.
Despite not playing.
So the guys sitting are more in the corporate world.
Yeah. Academia probably have a different KPI, so it's fine. Interesting. Okay. So in other words, people, if they are very serious about their careers, golf looks like it's a way for them.
I mean, look,
For female. Okay.
Traditionally, men would go to bars and sit around and drink beer. But I mean, those days are gone now. So now people are more active. Golf is one way. So golf is another way to test it in the data. We would love to see if they go and sit in bars, but we can't collect that data.
Yeah.
So we thought, let's look at the golf data. So that's an anecdote showing that it works through activities where you have time with your boss. Then it works.
Interesting.
So this is where
Interesting.
Sumit is very creative because then he thinks, right?
Yeah.
How can I collect this? What other similar situation there is where the data is collectible? And so he's very creative at that.
Every 12 years. So this was very intriguing to me when I came to Singapore and found out about the calendar, and especially the dragon has a very kind of a what should I say? Auspicious meaning in the Chinese calendar. So the first thing we think, let's see what is happening in the dragon years to birth rates. And in Singapore, actually, the birth rate goes up by around 8% during the dragon year. And then the obvious question is, it has to be bad. Because if there are 12% or 8% more babies running around, then those babies will go to school,
More
they will go to
competitive.
college,
Yeah.
they'll be more competitive because you can't fix the demand, essentially, of, the supply of teachers easily.
Yeah.
You can't just say on this year, I'm going to increase the supply of teachers by 8%.
Yeah.
So the supply of teachers stays constant, but the demand of students goes up.
Yeah.
And so the teacher-student ratio gets imbalanced and the students don't get as much quality education. And so we looked at that, and then we looked at their labor market outcomes and their wages. And we found that their long-term wages are down by 6% of the dragon babies. So in the long run, they're paying a big price, not just 1 year or 2 years after graduation, but 10 to 20 years after graduation. Their wages are permanently down relative to non-dragon babies in Singapore. Now, this has implications beyond Singapore because you can look at every Chinese-dominated country where they care about their superstition. They're giving extra births on dragon years, and that has a huge implication on their children's, wages or income.
So that holds true throughout the other
Yes.
Chinese-dominated societies.
People have looked in Vancouver and China, and they found similar evidence.
I think to add on, Sumit.
Then how to give
comments.
birth to Chinese to dragon babies?
I think Chinese parents tend to do their dragon baby a little more. I think in the sense.
Yeah, it's a
so we
thing.
do find that the consumption for these dragon baby tend to be higher. They actually consume more despite maybe earning less. These people used to consume a lot more during the parents tend to tell them, with different kind of toys and food and so on. I think this behavior carry forward. So we see their consumption actually higher compared to other
Okay, interesting.
non-dragon paper.
Interesting. Okay, so help me understand. Let me just be clear on this. Essentially, because the parents think that dragon baby is a thing, so when they have that dragon baby, they spend more on the baby. And the baby then eventually grow up to be used to a certain level of consumption, relatively higher to other babies of other years. But then in contrast, they actually make 6% less because of the competition, just by sheer number of people. So it's a double whammy lah. Not very smart to have dragon
And they spend more.
That's right.
The dragon
That's
babies
consumption.
Yeah.
spend more.
Yeah, interesting.
And we notice also in luxury, right?
Yes.
Because we
They
know
buy more
they
luxurious
buy
items.
from where? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, I cannot hire dragon babies. Interesting. Okay.
No, you can pay them less.
Yeah, you can
right?
pay less. It's relatively comparative 6%. Oh my. Okay.
We also find that actually Tiger Girl actually doing much better.
Serious.
Because the Tiger years actually the less woman, less baby, less competition, and then your 2 year between apart from the dragon baby boomer. So actually they actually benefited because of this what Sumi mentioned earlier, because of this 2 year structure in fact on reservice the national service. So we find that this 2 year effect actually spill over to the female called
No, but beyond that, because I think in the Chinese culture, having a tiger girl is unauspicious.
Really?
Because they think tiger girls are more aggressive. So they don't want to have girls in tiger ears.
But tiger girls are high flyers, right? So maybe they truly are more aggressive.
But actually, if you look at tiger girls, they actually do better in life because there are less number of girls being born in the tiger years. So they actually, because the competition is less, they do better in life.
So wait, just to be clear, there's just generally a dip in babies in the tiger years, right? And by extension, there'll be lesser tiger girls, right? Not because somehow that year lesser girls come out, the proportion stays somewhere. Okay, wow. So we must have more tiger babies. I mean, if you're objective about this thing and you want to let the data guide you on your strategy, then having kids in the tiger years actually is better.
Yes.
Right? Because you're still gonna get 10 classes in Raffles Girls, you're still gonna get 10 classes in Hwa Chong, and there are just lesser kids to compete for that 100 over spots. Right.
This is sometimes we call unintended consequences. Because family planning and having children sometimes is not
Of course.
actually
Of course.
so easily planned. I think, this is what we observe, unintended consequence because of the superstitious behaviors of certain race. So I think these are some of the effects we observe.
Very interesting.
Over the years, in fact, we are looking not just one cycle, we are looking at more than one cycle.
Wow. So this year is Dragon Year,
But
Come
we
on, no
can't
choice
study-
already, no choice
I know,
already.
but we can't study them till
Yeah,
12
but
years or
24 years
by which time
later.
we are retired.
Somebody else will look at that question.
Yeah. Someone will take over the team, right? You will probably extend beyond that. Oh, that is so interesting. Okay, nice. Hey, welcome to the Financial Coconut Podcast Network. I'm your host, Reggie, aka Your Chief Financial Coconut. And if you're loving what we're creating here, like, share, subscribe, share with your loved ones, comment in the comment section below. And we'll see you for great content on Chills with TFC.
We can talk a little bit about, because another strand of literature that we really think or care about in Singapore is how do people use electricity and water? Because essentially the environmental effect of our usage is big. And as consumers, what do we do? So we can talk about two quick studies. One is water consumption in Singapore. Just to give you the aggregate data, average Singaporean consumes around 160 liters of water per person per day. Okay. Ideally, we would like them to consume per day.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Ideally, we would like them to consume around 135 or 140 liters of water per person per day. Now, to bring that down to that level is not easy. So we thought, let's think about how we can do this. Economics suggests that if you raise prices, people will reduce demand for those goods. So in Singapore, actually, water prices went up 2 times. In 2000, 18 and 19 by around total of 30% and 41%, depending on how much water you consume. And we actually looked at the data. The data was very good because we had data of every meter in Singapore, their bill for the last 10 years. So it's not a sample, it's not one area, we have the entire country. So we were able to carefully look at the data and show that prices go up, people's water consumption goes down by around 6%. So that's quite significant. If you think about 160 liters, that's around, they're reducing around 10 liters of water per month because of prices going up. And that was significant for us to achieve the target of around 135 liters to get to. The other study we looked at is how can we reduce electricity consumption? And the big part of electricity consumption for households is the air conditioning. How can we reduce air conditioning usage? So there was a very cool experiment done by the government. Essentially, they asked randomly for certain schools for kids to bring in their electricity bill. And if they reduce their electricity bill by 10%, then the kids will be eligible to win a prize. So we said, let's look at the data and see if the kids were able to convince their parents. Like my son can essentially convince me to do anything. When he's 4, he can just tell me, I want this, this, this. I'll just give in after a while. So then we said, does this actually work? And we were able to see that in the data of the schools where they were giving this prize, the electricity bill of the neighborhood went down by 2% on average, which is a big deal because essentially the kids were making nothing for doing that. And if we can do these experiments, not just in Singapore, but around, we can have huge effects. Subsequently, Tian Fu and I followed up and we said, let's do a subsequent study. And we did a second experiment in Singapore by putting these banners up all around the hawker centers. You want to talk about that, Tian Fu?
Yeah, I mean, we also look at the same experiment, looking at when the banner is actually put up near the hawker center, people can see this campaign going on, how effective some of this information, because I think people actually learn to be more careful because you put out the banner, you teach people how to save energy, give them tips, and also conduct a campaign by sending out pamphlets and so on. People who live near the hawker center where you put out the banner, I think tend to be more conscious about consuming energy. So I think we do find that during the campaign period, people actually tend to cut down their energy consumption.
Interesting. So in other words, print ads still can work.
I think it's
right. It's just about where you put it. It's strategic.
Visibility. Because you see it every day. You go to hawker center, you see it, and you look at it. It makes sense. And then there's good tips for you to learn how to do this. You know, I think that actually triggered people's check worker behavior intervention. Because if you are not aware of this, you don't really think about it. Nobody will really consciously go and switch off the light, turn off your aircon.
Of course.
And if you see this every day, when you go to the market, when you go home, you see it in your outside your block and your lift lobbies and so on. I think you tend to be more conscious. You want to save some energy as well.
Wow. Okay.
I think the other thing, interestingly, I think Subi mentioned about saving the water. We also did the experiments. We call this information feedback. You know, if you do not know how much you consume in terms of during your shower, how much water do you consume? I think people really don't really understand or
it's true.
aware about saving water. So we did a very simple. We did together with these PUBs and government agency. We're giving household smart meter. We call it smart meter. When you shower, you know how much water you consume. So we're not just giving the information, but we also have this nudging effect. When you consume more than 30 liters, then this meter will come out this, words. You consume too much water.
Siren.
And then they also
the water stop.
The water will stop. But there's also a polar bear in this smart meter. If you consume more than 30 meters, this polar bear will disappear because ice melt and polar bear will be somewhere in the water. I think this nudge people in the sense you know how much water you consume, and then you probably become more careful next time when you every time you shower, you see this number, you see this meter. It's sort of like give them some effects about information feedback. You know how much you use. You want to be more careful and conscious about your consumption.
That's interesting.
Because this effect is very, very, very obvious because we did a survey before the experiment started. And after the experiment started, we asked how much you use during your shower. The information can range from 2 liters to 100 liters. After the experiment, we asked again the same question. the range can narrow to about 20 to 30 liter. So it's very, very close to what they actually consume.
Interesting.
I think this is information effect.
Yeah. I get it. Essentially, it's not just about using price to curb consumption. Actually, just that showing people how much they consuming also adds to their effect.
That's why I think this is a behavior nudging. I mean, it's quite established in the behavior economic. I think you probably seen quite often in the urinal. There's this mosquito or this. They are also nudging behavior, trying to nudge people to be more careful. I think this is some of the small things that actually can change.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
I want to add on also to what Sumit said about the campaign among the school children. After the campaign ended, right, the behavior to save on electricity continues.
Persistent.
It wasn't just the incentive during the campaign. Even after that, there was a lag, the effect was still there.
Interesting.
So these habits can be nurtured and prolonged even when there's no incentive.
That's a very good point.
Interesting. And I think a lot of corporate, they use something like that. They hook you in and then they tie you in on something and then they kind of adjust your way of life and then eventually you kind of just settle in on that, right?
It also means habits can be cultivated.
Yes.
It's true.
So don't think that, when I spend, I need to spend. No.
Yeah.
You can change your behavior and maintain the proper behavior. So I think the lesson to be taken out from this is that we want to cultivate these good habits, even when there is no incentive.
Nice. And I think in this book that you guys published, there were a few of this, right? Something about the credit card, the miles game, right? Which is like very hot these days, right? Like everyone is on the miles game, right? Every cafe that I go to is like someone's talking about the miles game, So the corporations have done a great job in that front, right? But and there's always a myth that I will only spend what I need to spend, right? So there's a baseline thought that everybody thinks that they can do that, right? So I'm just playing the game to maximize whatever value that I can get, and I'm not gonna adjust my consumption, right? Just to meet the incentives of the game, right? But is that true, right? Like what has your research found out about this?
We studied on credit cards, and I must say, it can apply to non-credit card situations as well, as long as there's a promotion, right? And we will see online now, right? You spend so much, I give you $2 off. You buy 2 items, I give you 1% off. The same concept is there. So what we found is that just by giving people a very small incentive, it's only 1% off, cashback. It's so minor, and yet consumption or use of the credit card went up. I mean, of course, you think, okay, I'm getting 1% back, right? That's good. That's a savings. But it went beyond that. People can't stop. They don't stop. They just carry on spending. So whatever you had saved initially from the first $100, you save only $1, but in their mind, it's like, save $1 and then, can spend more. In the end, you spend more than you save. It's like penny wise, pound foolish.
I mean, the worst was that they actually not only spend more, if they just spend more and they didn't carry debt, that would be okay. Okay, you have needs, you go and buy some things, and because I'm going to get a reward, I'm going to take advantage of that by buying that thing that I may have bought in the future now. But what they are doing is they're carrying debt, which is very expensive. You're carrying debt at 24% interest. So that is the most puzzling part, that by giving this incentive, a tiny incentive, as Sui Hun said, the consumer is actually getting fooled or fooling themselves that, I can justify my purchase or justify carrying debt because I'm getting some reward. Either they need financial literacy, they need financial education to understand that these rewards are a gimmick. They only work on the margin. Look, if I need to qualify for PPS for Singapore Airlines, and I'm at 24,500, and I only need 500 miles to qualify, then maybe it's worth it to take a trip from here to Hong Kong and back just to qualify. But don't do it just because, I'm at 12,000, I need to be at 25,000. Let's just go on a trip to Italy or go to South America just to make up the miles, even though you will not make it to 25,000. Now you have spent $12,000 on your credit card. That's foolish. But this is kind of behavior what we're observing, that these people are just spending without realizing is that really going to benefit me or not.
Interesting. So based on that, the objective idea is that, all these promotion just does not benefit you in that sense.
At least they do benefit you, but the consumers don't realize when they will benefit you. They just say, oh, because I'm going to get this benefit, let me go out and spend more, or let me travel more, or let me do whatever I do. And I use this as a justification for my behavior.
It's girl math, right? Or
Yes.
something. That's what we call these days. Yeah. Interesting.
Sometimes I think got to do with saliency of the consumer. Because I think another example we found out is like, actually when we switch from ALS, area licensing scheme, I'm not sure whether you still remember last time you go and buy this triangle plate at the entry before you enter.
It's quite a long time
Yeah,
ago.
that's many years ago. Then they
It's just like, I don't know.
yeah, then we move on to ERP.
Yeah.
ERP, you just go through the gantry, it doesn't tell you how much you spend. I think with this you get more convenience. People actually spend more, with ERP. And last time you probably will wait before the clock switch, which is 10, you enter the CDB. Now ERP you cannot wait. You just enter, then it will just deduct from your credit card or from your EasyLink card.
Interesting.
So people don't really see, not so salient about how much they consume. So you actually tend to spend more instead of actually become more careful in your spending. I think that also related to saliency or financial literacy of consumer.
Yeah.
When it comes to some of these things, you are not aware about how much you consume and you tend to overconsume.
I understand. So, and it's the idea of the painlessness of going cashless, right?
Correct.
Like when you're paying in cash, you feel that thing going
That's right.
out.
I think-
All right. So
So
there's
we actually looked at
Yeah.
that exact
The e-wallet,
idea that
yeah.
you brought up.
Yeah.
We looked at that in India, and we showed that actually when you don't have the pain of paying, because cash, it leaves your pocket and you have the pain of paying. And when you go electronic and you don't have the pain of paying, your consumption actually goes up by 4 to 5% monthly. So you're persistently consuming more and benefiting the merchants, benefiting the cards, because essentially, like my son, he thinks the money grows on these plastic cards because he doesn't really have the concept of cash. He doesn't know what money is. He thinks the father just uses the card every time, and that must be money. So I think it's a bad thing we are doing with time, because we are moving to all these electronic means of payment. It's cultivating habits in us which are making us overconsume.
Which brings us maybe to our research on bankruptcy.
Actually, the bankruptcy data allows you to do quite a number of studies. I think the first one we have looked at is very simple story about gender difference in terms of risk aversion and risk behavior. Whether
Is there actual difference?
Yeah, I think the female tend to be more risk averse. I think we do found that actually the bankruptcy risk is lower for female. I think men tend to be more aggressive. We do find that there's same behavior in driving, car accident and so on. I think to see the difference between the two gender group, we do found that the behaviors affect their bankruptcy rates. And subsequently we did another one. I think also looking at intergeneration bankruptcy relationship, whether your parents experience bankruptcy, how would this affect the children when they're grown up? If your children's was very young when the parents bankrupt or experience bankruptcy event, I think the children tend to learn a lot more and become more prudent in their financial spending. So there's some interesting kind of behavior, intergeneration kind of bankruptcy experience and also effects.
Does it just curious on that front? Does it account for, let's say, if the parent bankrupt, then there's a tendency that the family is considered like undernourished, right, financially.
Yeah.
So does it then, based on that, kind of affect the kid? In that sense, right? It's not just about
actually what we found here is actually through the education effects, when the children actually see the parents going through this bankruptcy event, and also when parents speak to the children, and especially mothers, actually, if the bankrupt is a mother, actually we find the effect stronger, because I think mother probably is the one that who actually bring up the children, interact with the children at home. I think the effect is stronger compared to the father's bankrupt. So I think that could be one of the channel, where the education channel, when the mothers and they become more try to impart some of this financial knowledge, and try to make sure the children learn from don't repeat the experience. I think this effect is stronger.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Bankruptcy. But I think the most interesting part of the research for this round is the BTO thing. That one just made the rounds, right? Everyone picked that thing up, right? So you try to talk a little bit about how BTO is tied to then marriage, and then affordability, and then even the MOP and divorce. There are many components in this thing, right? And different publications just kind of picked it up all over the place. So I would love for you guys to talk a little bit more about that, right? So where is this coming from?
Okay, so we can talk about this, because to us this was an interesting policy to study this from the get-go, that essentially to get this highly subsidized house in Singapore. I mean, essentially, to put this in perspective, which every Singaporean should understand, that the government is giving you a subsidy of $100,000+ when you buy a house. But that subsidy comes with some strings attached, which is you have to be married if you want to get access to this. If you're above 25 years of age, or if you're above 35, you don't have to be married. But you have to have some criteria on your income. It has to be below certain amounts, and then you still qualify in the secondary market to buy the HDBs. So we were thinking this creates marriages, but obviously this will create some unwanted marriages. I mean, most people fall in love because they really love each other, but some people fall in love because they realize there is $100,000 attached to this love that they can cash in at some point. Okay, so we thought, let's look at the data. What is happening? Obviously, they are marriages. This is by default, because otherwise you don't get access to the housing. But 5 years later, when essentially this kind of have this ability to cash out, then do people cash out, and then they realize, look, this was a marriage of convenience because we both wanted housing. Now that fact, we have sold this housing, maybe we don't need to be married anymore. While this is true in the data, I do want to point out two facts along with this, because that's untestable in the data.
Yeah.
That remember, there could be unwanted marriages that started out as marriage of convenience, but they fell in love after they bought the HDB, and they really started loving each other. We can't test that in the data. So that is also true, has to be true, that some marriages happened because of HDB. The other thing is that most people, vast majority of the people who are buying HDBs actually do love each other. Okay,
that's good to know, huh? That's good to know. Okay, I don't think we want a whole city of people marrying for the flat. Okay,
so we want to be very careful in saying that. Look, vast majority of the marriages happen because they love each other. There are some marriages that happened because they didn't love each other, but HDB made them love each other, and they continue to love each other. But there are some marriages that actually fell apart because they actually may have never loved each other, even if they didn't buy HDB. But the fact is, they got this 100,000, they cashed it out, then they said, okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, fair. No, and
actually, interestingly, we observe at the data. Actually, when we talk about BTO, we mean the subsidized flat. So when the number of BTO flat, the subsidized flat increase, there's a corresponding increase in number of marriage between 24 and 34 years. Yeah. So why is it so? There's strong correlation, even though we cannot prove there's a causality whether people marry for house or people marry because of love, right? But I think there's this strong correlation. So lately, when the HDB flat increase, we do see that 24 to 34 group, actually number of marriages increase. So especially in the BTO housing estate, where there are a lot of BTO flat, so there's strong kind of evidence to show that there are some correlation, because again, it's hard to prove whether the number of BTO increased because of number of marriage increase, or is it because BTO really induce a lot more people to get married, because you have to get married and sign a registration of marriage before you can get a key.
Yeah.
So which one comes first is something that is harder to test. Actually.
I know. Researchers cannot take a position, but I can
Yeah.
take a stand. I do think it's because of the BTO, right? And because I do think majority of people, it's not that they don't like each other, right? They're kind of already on the running, say, oh yeah, I kind of know, yeah, it's not bad. And then at some point, be like, let's be a bit strategic. There's this new thing out there, right? Let's go for it, right? So I think that's
Which is
the
fair.
narrative.
I think it should be. I mean, if I want to do something anyway, but then you give me some
it's like a
incentive to do
promotion.
it. Yes.
It's like a promotion.
Which is very good. I mean, so I think the Singapore government's BTO policy is very good. But as Tien Phu mentioned earlier, everything we do in life can have unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And part of the job of a researcher is to document those unintended consequences so we are aware, okay, what can go wrong or could have gone wrong with certain policies. Maybe we can change those policies. Maybe we can say we don't require the marriage requirement to get a BTO. Maybe because at some level, maybe it's pushing the people too hard to be in this market.
Interesting.
I think one thing we observe is very interesting is actually one possible reason why the marriages subsequently fail. I think, just to put this in context, I think the number of marriages with the BTO flat actually is about 50 to 60%. It's very high number of people get married because of this. I think divorce rate actually, even though there are some evidence, but it's very small. We're talking about below 6% or 5% and so on.
Okay.
So it's not really
But it's still 1/10 of the BTO population.
Because we do find that this married couple, I think their consumption spending actually increased after they bought the BTO. I think compared to before the BTO, I think a lot of this may go into the housing financing, mortgages, and so on. So I think for young couple, when they actually plan for buying a BTO flat and getting married, I think it's very important to be prudent because you don't want to get financially overburdened because of the buying a bigger house or buying houses which is too expensive in mature estate and so on. This can have some possible impact on subsequent marriages because you actually affecting your quality of life after marriages. You got more, you have to pay more mortgages. You cannot go traveling. You cannot spend in good restaurant and so on. I think that prudency is very, very
interesting.
important.
But prudency is my alley. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm the financial guy. But I want to ask, because you talk a little bit about BTO and you bring in resale, right? So is there some research to show that couples that buy resale or couples that buy BTO, the marriage quality or divorce rate, is there difference?
Actually, we use the BTO as a treatment group. We control for other include the resale and private as well. So I think we do find that effect actually came out in the study. So if you tend to buy BTO flat, you tend to actually have lower kind of spending. And we also look at the spending before.
So buy resale will have a failed marriage, right?
So you have to plan properly because you look at the spending actually 1 year before the BTO flat collection and 1.5 year after that, compared to before, 2 years before. I think the spending actually the consumption actually gone up. So this about 12%. I think could actually be indication, probably the financially they are become more stretched.
That's why, very interesting. Okay, so the idea is not BTO is better for marriage. It's just because generally I think resale prices are much higher. So it ties to the thesis of if your consumption increased by a lot, causes strain in the family, and then it increases your probability of breaking up after that.
So especially for those people who just came up into the industry, I think financial planning is very important. Don't just straight away jump into bigger flat and buy a flat in the prime location in mature estate, which is, of course, I think will add on to their financial burdens.
Fair. I get it. And the narrative has kind of shifted. In the past, it's like, okay, we get what we can first, then we upgrade, right? There's the narrative probably in the 20, 30 years ago, right? But now it's like one time good one, right? We gotta go for the right. We gotta go for the good one, right? Is that what you has y'all done? Is there any research around this? that is
Not really,
actually
but
like
this
that.
is how research starts.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you gave us a very good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah,
So
great.
we will actually take this up in the next book.
But
Let me point
yeah,
out one more
yes.
thing. I think this is very important for us to say that a lot of the research we document in the book is done with a lot of co-authors, either at NUS Business School, NUS at large, or other people in Singapore or abroad. I want to give credit. I mean, these kind of research is not just one person. It typically takes a team of people
For
to
sure.
kind of conduct this. Like this BTO, this work was done very carefully by our junior colleague, Fani, whose entire research agenda is to think about intergenerational mobility among families and in Singapore especially. So I think they deserve a lot of credit. Somehow I always feel writing these books or sitting here, we kind of take up the limelight, and our colleagues who did actually the hard work, they don't get it, or they don't get this kind of that they actually put in a lot of hours in these projects.
Nice.
It's actually collective effort of many researchers.
Yeah, I'm
Because
sure.
It's impossible to do a few.
Yeah, the
research
three of
and-
you all do all this research. You no need have family, right? You just focus on this, right? So
True.
nice, interesting. Thanks for sharing. I think there's a lot of good stuff. So other than buying your book, right? Is there any other plug that you want to plug? You don't need to keep plugging NUS Business School. I saw that coming. It's like NUS Business School is a good school. You should join.
No, I would say that, look, financial literacy and financial planning is a very key aspect. And one of the reasons we have written these books and we have been doing this is to make the average Singaporean aware of situations, how they can actually improve their lifestyle financially. In that sense, I mean, your podcast itself is a great place for them to listen. I'm not plugging your podcast, but I think any podcast that makes them aware, situationally aware of how to improve their financial well-being is very important.
Yeah, and to be fair, sometimes a lot of these things, consumers are thrown into the situation, right? You're not aware, right? You don't have like a higher view of this whole thing. And whereas a lot of companies, they have like a whole team, running all the data sets. They know how to, tick you and nudge you and make you move in a certain way, right? But as we expound more and more of these things and highlight to the audience, hey, actually this happens, you can be a bit more aware, and then you can guard against these things.
I think we also want Singaporeans as well as non-Singaporeans, by reading these books, know that appreciate or become more curious, not necessarily just to make better or wiser financial decisions, but just to be curious. Why does this happen? And so on, And I think if we could develop or evolve into with more inquiring minds, all the better.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Awesome.
I think to add on what Shui Hun comments, I think the policymaker also take note of some of the research. I think they did come back to us and ask us about some of the research finding. I think hopefully our research also inform policy, and policy can improve, or they will be the other way around. We use the policy in our experiments. The result can actually help them to tweak and improve their policy as well.
I can take one specific example. One of the things we document in our book is about the Silver Support Program. So the Silver Support Program was essentially giving the bottom 20% of the people who are retiring around $600 for every quarter to help them through after retirement. And that number was bottom 20%. Recently, I was talking to one civil servant, and she told me after they read our article and our research paper, they went and convinced the government officials to actually increase the quantum. Now, actually, the quantum went from 20% to 35% of the people are getting that money. So essentially, you can see a feedback loop on policy causing researchers to study that policy, good or bad, and showing if the policy works. Then the regulators, the government officials, taking the results from the research and saying, "Oh, now we can improve the policy."
Yeah, I like that. Or in the essence of Singapore being results driven, right? Yes, cool. I like that. In closing, any places that our audience can connect with you? If let's say they would like to chat further, you know.
I think they should connect with Sui Hun. She is the right person to be discussing. Do come and visit us at the business school, or write to Sui Hun, or write to all of us. We would love to hear from our audience and our readers, and tell us of stories that they have in their mind, and tell us, hey, why don't you go study this question? If we have the data, we will definitely go study it, and we will bring it up in our next book.
We actually would like to go to schools. And I think in schools, when we explain all these in a simple manner, right, these economic concepts and the research, I think it will help them, the youth. And we would like to give these talks to schools.
I did one. There was like 400 kids in that room. They were like, I think, 8th or 9th graders. And they loved it. They had so many interesting questions for me in that audience.
Yeah.
I was amazed that how smart these kids were.
So that would be good, right?
Yes.
You know, or any other platform. I mean, it's not necessarily just to plug the book. I mean, it's not that. Our intention really is to help Singaporeans. Sales of the book, I can tell you, our royalty proceeds all go to bursary and scholarship. It doesn't come to us. So really, we did this for the society.
I like that.
Because I think the other thing is that we really welcome a lot more collaboration, and whether it's government agency, private sector, the availability data is very important in providing our what we call the evidence-based kind of research, because you really need to look at historical data, look at the number, and see whether we can actually draw any important inference. Because another interesting methodology we use, we are not just using one source of information, so we're trying to match data from different sources. I think this also probably a good kind of a learning experience for government agency as well, because I think they probably can learn a lot more if they can actually work together, interagency, try to share information, which some of them started to actually experiment that. I think this is something good in terms of helping us to understand better.
Or come to us.
Yeah, come to us.
Yeah. Great, cool stuff. And if the future you have other research that are interesting, you can always direct them our way, and then we would love to chat with them. Okay, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Very much.